We currently have 10 different Nordic equipment options. Scroll to the end of this video to see them all and look in the description for my personal exercise equipment list with links. What's up, ATG fam? Welcome to a two-part series. Two parts because they're just so different, where we're covering the ACL. Let's look at an ACL tear. Let's say you have a really forceful stop in the ACL tears. Well, the ACL connects the thigh bone from the back of the thigh bone to the front of the shin bone. So if we look from a muscle perspective, so part one, we're covering the external protection. We're basically looking at how strong you are in this motion. So that's what's happening, is this is not strong enough, so this bone is actually pulled and tears the ACL. ACL starts at the back of the thigh bone and connects to the front of the shin bone. So a simple test that I use, which this took me 2 years to get, but I'm going to show you how on average we get people there now in about 36 weeks on average. And you can see hundreds of people now online can do this. So the main reason people fail on Nordics is they think of it as only a rehab exercise, first off, and they don't train it year round. And then they're so weak in it that they kind of give up hope, and they never get to actually train in the range that the ACL tears. So people the ACL's not usually tearing here. The ACL's usually tearing here, but they never get, only the freak athletes. So some of the freakiest guys get to where they can control out and pull back in really far, but then the weaker guys never get there. So I'm gonna show you the end product, but I'm gonna show you how to get there. So with a full range of motion Nordic, you would contract the glutes first, because if you didn't, you could cheat and pull. See, that's already taking the pressure rather than my knee, rather than the actual hamstring, the knee flexion taking the pressure. So a contraction of the glutes and then keeping the shoulder above the hip. So that's a test. That took me 2 years, but here's why I struggled for so long, and I had given up on that, okay? The full range of motion. You don't get strong in the range that you don't train. So anybody can progress on Nordics. The average is about a 1 foot hip elevation to start. So this is how I help hundreds of people get to that ability, and on average it takes about 36 weeks. You want this right around your hip level. So now we're just reducing gravity, okay? So this is the same thing I just did, initiating with the glutes and then pulling, and then we're fighting as hard as we can, okay? Initiate with the glutes. So now I'm getting to fight. See these ranges here? So now I'm working in that range. I'm working all the way to this range rather than being stuck in this zone of never getting to the range that the ACL actually ends up tearing. You see that? So this is begun in my second program. So in my second program, it's begun, and we're doing 5 sets of 5 in 5 minutes, just once a week. I only got here by training this once a week. It's very intense, but you can go really hard on it if you just train it once a week. Like for today, I already did my dense strength session. I did my 5 sets of 5. Then I just shot a new form tutorial on this, showing how to use your interval timer, just making it really fast. And now I'm doing more. So I'm going too far in it, but I'm only training it one day. So then you'll get over time just by gradually, right? So from there, you would go down, say, 1 inch or 2 at a time, and then that way, by the time you get down, so see, this is great control all the way down, initiate with the hip, boom. And there we have an excellent drill. Now, I'm gonna give you one more issue. So what makes us go forward, and then we have those stops, right? Well, our hip power is key for athleticism, but then our ACL is gonna have to keep up with that hip power. So part of this equation, okay, let me get a bar here. I need one more, and then this thing will be loaded with my body weight. So I'm gonna show you an alternative. Basically, I don't think there's such thing as a bad movement, but I don't like hip thrusts. I would never use hip thrusts, and I've never used box squats. I use both of those prior to tearing my ACL. And I see that the more people are doing those, the more they're having ACL tears, the more pain they're feeling through the inside of that knee where it's actually pulling on the ACL because they're not protected. Because basically, so if you just do a hip thrust, you're powering up the glute, right? And if you do a box squat, again, you're powering up the glute. So you're adding more hip power than you might then be able to handle. So you're training your body out of its natural design. So I'm just gonna show you an alternative. So once I've gotten people through about 12 weeks of Nordics, then we do start moving upwards to the hips. And this is just one example. So from our other drills, we're flexible. So a basic standard would be your body weight without rounding the back. So now this is a way to power up the hips, but through the hamstring, you see that? And then you would want to take this until you're on one leg. So I am powering up my hip, but through the hamstring. You see that? So I'm never gonna tell you, oh, don't do this without providing the alternative. So we do a number of things to power up the hip, but it has to be going through the hamstring. And you wanna think of your body building it from the ankle, then the knee, then start to build the hip. So this is part one, is just understanding that your ACL is doing the same thing as in Nordic. So the better you get at Nordic, the more protected you get. And the more powerful your hips get, you have a responsibility. The greater your hip power, the greater your Nordic strength is gonna need to be. Otherwise, you're actually manufacturing ACL tears. You're manufacturing increased risk of ACL tear by how powerful you're gonna be moving versus how strong are you through your Nordic. So hope that helps, and you can see that I have solution for the Nordic, and then we gradually build solutions to even power up the hips, but doing so through the hamstring rather than neglecting the hamstring to power up the hip.